Hi everyone, how you doing? Tired, bit tired, aren't we? Bit tired. Thank you so much for coming to this, by the way. Really appreciate it. I think it's going to be really interesting. My name is Matt, and today we have a panel of people here to talk to you all about SVOD and how that is affecting what we do as broadcasters. Everyone here pretty much is in the linear broadcasting territory, and obviously the likes of Netflix and Amazon have had a dramatic impact for all of us as people who watch that stuff, but also on the people who are making traditional telly in a traditional way. And today we're going to delve for the first time into some data. Yes, data fans, there's going to be some data, which is actually really quite revelatory, because as you may know, the streaming services don't like to share or need to share or want to share any of their viewing data. They don't really care as long as people are subscribing to their services, but the rest of the telly industry does care. And so that's why we're all here today, to find some of that stuff out. So joining me to talk through all of that, we have Brian Fura, who's the SVP of Nielsen. Hello, Brian.
Good morning.
You're basically like the Barb guy of America, right?
Without the accent.
Without the accent. You've got a much more delightful accent, so don't you apologise for that. We have Rufus Radcliffe, who is the Group Marketing Director at ITV. And marketing is something we're going to be talking about a lot during this. Obviously, how do you get people to come and watch your show if it's not on one of these platforms, or it's on a platform that is slightly different? We also have Joe Fox, Director of Entertainment Marketing at Sky, so you have that same struggle. And Kerry Taylor, whose job title is going to push this session into overtime. EVP, MTV International, Chief Marketing Officer, Viacom UK at Viacom International Media Networks. Mic drop, did I get it right? That's right, I didn't miss anything out.
That is right.
Perfect. So, some big players from the linear TV world, and also you have SVOD services of your own. I want to start, though, by talking with you, Brian, about the data. I mentioned data. You heard the crowd. People are excited about this. There's nothing sexier at 9:30 a.m. than a bit of cold, hard data. So let's dive straight into it. You have, for years at Nielsen, been analysing linear broadcasting, correct?
Correct.
And Netflix know their numbers. They're the only people that know I have sat and cried at 3 back-to-back episodes of Queer Eye, and they're not telling anyone about it. But you now know some of that data.
Yeah, we over the past year, we really started to delve into it. We've been doing a lot of work with our clients from a proprietary basis, but at the end of last summer, we started releasing it externally, so everyone could not only see their own, but see everyone else's. So that was kind of the big change in the industry, and they could understand what was happening.
And Joe, as someone who does your job working at Sky, how important is it for you to get your hands on data like this, to have a full understanding of the clear picture of what people who are available to watch TV are watching?
I think any interest. Basically, what we're trying to do is offer choice to anybody, regardless of whether they're watching overnight, watching on demand, watching on Now TV. So it's interesting to see what the market's doing, only because the traditional models of how we've recorded or measured how people are watching the successive programmes has changed because of the way that the SVOD market's changed the process. So. Interesting.
Yeah, and Rufus, you and I were talking earlier about the fact that we don't have that complete picture. Was it 70% of viewers, we know what they're doing, but there's 30% that we have no idea what anyone's doing with that time? We know they're watching something, we don't know what it is they're watching.
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess every morning we look at the overnight data, and it's not telling us everything that happened, and the opportunity moving forward is to get a fuller picture of it, and it's kind of weird as an industry that we are to an extent at the moment, and we all know the reasons why we are making decisions slightly with one hand tied behind our backs. We don't know fully what's going on, but there is a plan in place to sort that out.
Yes. And Kerry, you work with across multiple channels, across multiple parts of the world. Do you feel like there is a legitimate threat? Is there a worry, or maybe worry is too strong a word, but a sense that there is something to defend with these new players who have had such a quick and big ascension?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think, ultimately it's more competition in the market for our audience's time and attention. So there's definitely a need to up your game and ensure that you're selling our shows and exciting audiences about what we are creating, against them. And also, it's quite fashionable, isn't it, to kind of love the new as well and look at the kind of traditional linear players and be less excited by that. So I think we also, want to show that we're as exciting, as the new players in the market.
Sure, someone's walked in. If it was that meme of the guy turning his head, you're the old girlfriend, Netflix is the
Exactly.
new one. Sure. All right, let's give the people what they want, Brian. They want to see a bar graph. Come on. Let's have a little look here. So this is, firstly, it's a beautiful bar graph, but talk us through it in the simplest terms possible. Imagine, Brian, that you are talking to an idiot.
So, just a couple of things before I get started. This is television viewing only. We're measuring this on the TV. And when we started to measure the Netflix audience and the SVOD audience, we had to kind of think of it differently. How can we represent what was happening across these programs instead of one episode being launched a night? This is an entire season, in one day. So this represents each episode of these various programs on premiere day, release day, whatever you prefer. So it's the average audience, the rating projected out to the total US. Stacked by episode, and it gives you a feel across these programs the impact that that they had, and this is how our clients are really trying to understand not only how big they are, but what they're doing on that day to the linear and the overall TV ecosystem.
Okay, so let's take a look then. So this is. It's not quite an overnight, but it is the launch day. So let's take a show. And the one that obviously stands out there is Stranger Things. I mean, my goodness me, it has had 22,853,000 views. So that's not individual viewers, because as we can see from the colours that are diminishing as it goes up, some people, one person is watching all of the episodes in that series. Quite a lot of them are just watching the first one. What does that tell you? Firstly, at the top there, that green bar, how many people watched Stranger Things in one hit on the first day it was released?
Yeah, that was, I looked at the data and we had to reprocess it a couple of times because I just couldn't believe it. But on day one of Stranger Things, 367,000 people in the US watched every single episode. It's like, that kind of stuff has an impact on GDP. So,
how many? 300,000?
367. So,
and how many episodes is there in a season?
They vary. That was 12. So it's just. I'm sorry.
12 hours of Stranger Things.
So that's
Great day in.
Yeah. I would love to have the opportunity to sit and watch TV for 12 hours at one sitting, but evidently 367,000 people did. It's quite extraordinary. Just to put it in context, it was about 9.4 million unduplicated people watched across the whole program on the first day, just to give you kind of a comparison. So there's a lot of that viewing was duplicated.
Okay, so in terms of the impact that has on the linear channels, if this was an overnight and it was in the mix with everything else, did that show blow everything else out of the water on that day?
It didn't blow everything away, but when we looked at episode 1, it definitely, particularly if you look at any of the younger demos, 18 to 34, it was number 1. There was a lot going on. It was an amazing week of television with sports and everything, but the episode 1 in particular definitely ranked number 1, and that was a pretty astounding assessment. That was one of the first times that everyone really started to understand, hey, this is a really big deal, and we have to understand what the impact is.
Well, I want to talk to all three of you actually about the impact, because if I was running a TV channel or running a service where I wanted people to come and watch something, and I knew that show or an equivalent show was going to drop on a particular day, are you now affecting your scheduling decisions based on the fact that Netflix is going to be stealing people's attention away for a few days? Is it sensible to, for example, launch a big new SkySIMON show when you know that a show that could be consuming some of that audience is about to drop on Netflix or Amazon?
It hasn't affected our decisions so far, but I think that's also because for some time we've moved away from just looking at the overnights as a measure of success. So for quite a long period of time now, we've been looking at our sort of 7-day consolidated, 28-day consolidated viewing as a measure of that success, because we know that the way consumers are watching has changed. And so that doesn't just affect the way we measure it, but how we release our shows. So for example, you know, people here will all know that we've been releasing our Sky Originals when we can as full series box set releases. We've also been doing them linear at the same time. We also offer them on Now TV. So essentially what we're saying is people want to consume TV differently. There's a lot of TV out there now to consume, so people are having to make decisions at a point of time about what they're ready for, and we'll just offer it to them in the way, therefore, that they want to enjoy it. And so we've just seen nothing but upside, really, because what we know from the TV viewing is that most of this stuff, you know, is additional viewing. So something like Netflix or Amazon, it's not necessarily replacing in the main other TV viewing, it just means people are watching more.
Okay, so they're finding 12 hours from somewhere to sit and do that as well as watching all the other stuff.
I do think Stranger Things changed things to a degree, because up until Stranger Things, I think, to your point, you felt like, well, it's on Netflix, people come and find it as and when, and actually, especially with season 2 and the launch of season 2, it was such a big marketing event globally that you realise actually you don't want to schedule around or launch something new when Netflix is launching a big new show now. I think, you know, the investment that they put into the marketing of Stranger Things season 2 was phenomenal. So from my perspective, I definitely want to be mindful of launching at a different time, because as you see from those first episodes, you know, for a youth audience, that was the pop cultural conversation. And I think today, in order to be successful, you have to be the centre of that conversation. One thing that we've started doing on MTV and on Comedy Central, so in pay TV, is changing how we schedule our shows. So on MTV, we just had a show called True Love or True Lies, and normally we would have done an episode every week, and we did it stripped across 2 weeks. Roast Battle on Comedy Central, stripped across a week. So even in the linear space, we're learning from the ways that people are consuming and changing now how we're scheduling to maximise our audience.
Okay, and Rufus, when you look at this data, what leaps out for you as either a concern or maybe something that people in this room might go, we'd be worried about that, but actually you are more relaxed about it?
Well, when I see that data, the main thing I think is Stranger Things is really good, and you know, people really like it, and they don't like The Crown quite as much. But you know, clearly, the competitive set that we're competing with now is changing, and we do absolutely have to be mindful of this stuff. But you introduced us as the kind of the linear people at the start, and I guess, you know, we are very conscious of trying to you know, offer our shows in new ways for people as well. So whilst we're, you know, from an ITV point of view, driving people to the original TX is really important, but also to Joe's point, there are more opportunities to see now. We've invested loads in the ITV Hub. We're trying to make it much more of a destination, and so whilst we want to maximise that audience at 9 p.m, for example, that, you know, that's just the start of what we do.
And you've had tremendous success with the ITV Hub in terms of experimenting with a paid model for it, which in a world where people are used to the brand of ITV being a thing that is free, albeit ad-funded, you were able to convince them to part with £4 a month to get content.
$3.99.
$3.99. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I've cheated them out of a pen. $3.99. You're right. It does sound more attractive that way. To part with their money to watch shows they could otherwise watch free, to have some of the additional benefits that app offers, and you're finding there's quite a good take-up on that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had really significant growth in it over this year. I mean, what we're finding is, you know, that viewers behave in very logical, sensible, intelligent ways. And what is happening? So this summer, with the ITV Hub Plus, which is our ad-free subscription service, you can take it anywhere in the EU. And so loads of Love Island fans were subscribing and took ITV Hub Plus on holiday with them. So, you know, it was a logical thing to do, and it's worked fantastically well. And I guess with shows like Love Island, you know, people are watching it on the big screen, but they're watching it on mobile, they're watching it on tablets, they're watching it in portable ways. We were offering people the opportunity to watch Love Island in the ways that suited them and their lifestyles.
So Brian, when you look at this data as someone who deals with looking at this sort of stuff every day, what are the things that leap out for you that you think, there's a story here, there is something that we need to pay attention to?
But, that's been part of the beauty of it, is after working on this for many, many years, it's every day is something new, and it's kind of relearning how consumers are using the video. One of the things that we're focused here on Netflix originals, but one of the biggest lessons that we've learned from the data is in looking across everything that's on Netflix, about 80% of the viewing of Netflix is the back seasons of TV content. So that's been a really important lesson for our clients to understand that, hey, while these programs are the ones that get all the press, a lot of the viewing is, the back seasons of Friends and things like that. That's where kind of the meat and potatoes on a regular basis is. Okay, and do we think then as broadcasters and commissioners, people making shows, do you think that by doing those deals early doors with Netflix, where they can take the content, that perhaps they have cannibalised your own opportunity to do stuff in the SVOD market? Are you now hesitant about putting your content on Netflix or doing deals with Netflix? And at this stage, does that matter? Has the horse already bolted because they're now so far into making originals that the audience don't really care whether it was an AMC show, an ITV show, or a Netflix original? What are we saying, Rufus?
It's the ultimate kind of... Netflix are a competitor for eyeballs for us, but they are also a customer of us, and it isn't a sort of binary decision of this is how we're going to operate in the future. We judge all this stuff on a case-by-case basis, but clearly, to Brian's point, the fact that a huge amount of Netflix's viewing is to stuff that has originally been on US networks or British PSB shows that we are consistently making shows that people love.
So post Love Island, people love the show. I don't need to tell you that. Loads of people said to me, I watched it this year and I actually missed last year's series, but it's all on Netflix, so I'm just going to go and binge watch that now. Is there a world in which you would much rather have realised there was that demand there and kept that series back as a thing that can be watched at any time on the ITV hub?
It's the older series of Love Island. It's not the most recent one, so we wouldn't. So that's an example of it. It's not quite as it's a sort of nuanced debate about how you slice and dice that stuff up. So it's not so. And at ITV we have lots of conversations about what's the right thing to do about that. But it wasn't the most recent series that we did that.
Okay.
But clearly, we've been incredibly overwhelmed by the sort of insatiable demand for Love Island, but because your assumption is that these shows have a shelf life when they're on, and then that's it. But actually, it's incredible the amount of the love for that show.
And Carrie, I want to talk to you a little bit about Friends, because obviously Comedy Central plays Friends a lot. It is part of the lifeblood of that channel.
Yeah.
What was it like when it was announced, 6 months ago?
Yeah.
Netflix have acquired all of Friends that they're going to put on in HD, and they're going to stream it, and you can watch whatever you want, whenever you want. Was there a sense that, from Comedy Central's perspective, that you needed to find another show that could become synonymous with your channel and the lifeblood of it? Or do you think, these two can coexist because there's a different way that the audience experiences the same show?
I think often, ideally, you want exclusivity on things, but at the same time, I think we found a way to coexist successfully. And actually, you just have to look at the opportunity and see that it just brings an even bigger audience to Friends, who then find it on Comedy Central. We also do an event called Friends Fest, where we go around the country and we bring the kind of Friends experience. And that's just been phenomenally successful this year. And I think that's also a large part due to the fact that a whole new audience have come into Friends via Netflix. So it's a bit like Rufus said, there's part competitor, part customer, and then also realising that in a world where there is so much competition, that the more people that can see your content, ultimately that's going to be good for the audience and it's good for business.
Although seeing your content on another platform presumably isn't good for your business.
Well, I think if you find a way to coexist in a way that you were talking about with Love Island and previous seasons being on Netflix, and you're not going to do justice to them, then you find a way that enables you to drive, to new content.
Okay.
And I don't think it's as us as them as it sounds. Like, we Britannia, which is one of our big Sky originals, which was really successful. That was a co-production with Amazon. So we're sort of working with them on that. Yeah. We've announced that we've got Netflix as our partners who are coming on to our box. So we're working with them on that. So I think at the end of the day, it's about the quality of the TV show, and competition is great for all of us because it means we're providing excellent TV for people to watch. And then it's about reacting to how people want to watch it. And that's where the interesting part is, and we're all sort of flexing around that.
Matt, what you're describing is really the art behind the science, and that's what we're working with a lot of our clients on. And every program is a little bit different, but they're trying to figure out, how long should we delay something before we license to Netflix? Is that going to have an impact on linear? But, the Golden Grail, the Golden Goose is to put it in there and really drive programming to linear. So we're seeing a lot of programs. There's a big ramp up right before a new season is launched on linear too. So there's a benefit of bringing people back to linear. Okay.
And are you noticing that companies are making decisions about their content in light of this data, where they are saying, for example, Disney removing a lot of stuff over a quite short period of time from Netflix to launch their own SVOD service? Are you noticing that might be a trend now, that people are going to be a little bit less sharey with their stuff and a little bit more possessive?
I think they're a lot more informed. So they're making decisions. If they're making a licensing decision, now they really understand not only the impact that it's having, to Netflix, but to linear content, because they can watch their viewers go back and forth. That's one of the key things. And obviously Disney is the really high-profile one, and everyone is kind of waiting to see how that goes. But I think it is going to drive value back and forth. We've got studios and talent and a lot of people that are using it that I think are much more informed about decisions they're making.
Okay, I am buzzing for another bar chart, so let's do it. Let's take a little look here. We have another one. Okay, so this is to do with binge viewing, which I think there would have been a time, maybe even 6-7 years ago, where if someone said, "What did you do this weekend?" and you went, "I just stayed at my house and watched 12 hours of telly," people would go, "Okay, that's quite sad," and it's strange that you've admitted that. Whereas now, people wear it like a badge of honour. I was able to get through all of Better Call Saul this weekend, or all of Stranger Things, or whatever it might be, and binging hasn't become a dirty word anymore. So talk to me about what this graph represents.
Yeah, binging was a real buzzword for a long time, and I think it was very overstated. And when we started to really look at this data, though, it's quite obvious that people, and just to frame this data up, this is of the people that viewed these programs, how many episodes did they view on the first day? So you can see people are very committed, and in certain programs, Defenders, for example, that was an hour program, and people were the people that watched, they were really engaged, and there was a tremendous amount of viewing. Netflix has done a brilliant job of creating an atmosphere and an environment that retains the viewer, makes it very easy to go to the next, and in fact encourages you to go to the next one. So binging is a real behavior, and we're seeing it strongly evidenced by the data.
And Joe, as you said, Sky's changed its story around how you can watch telly. You can
do it how you want. So for example, Save Me, which is one of our originals, 6% of that viewing of the entire series was on one day, and 50% was in the first 7 days. So we release it like that because we know that some people, that's how they'd prefer to watch it, and they really chewed through that really quickly. But we also, of course, schedule it linearly, and there's a lot of people who still do that as well. So it's really about saying, however you want to watch it, we're going to supply it to you that way.
So when you're coming to market that to the general public, who might think of, I've got Sky One or Sky Arts or whatever it might be, how do you communicate to them and say, listen, if you want to watch it all at once, it's there for you, and has that changed your marketing strategy?
I think it has a bit. I think what it means is with the UI, so like the EPG that Sky has, I think that's actually the biggest change, because essentially the way you think about your key art, I guess, has changed a lot, and how you think about how you release your trailers has changed a lot. So I guess in the old days you would go, okay, the show's coming out on the 14th of September, and then we will put a poster up 2 weeks beforehand, and we'll talk about it, and then we will pull that down, and we'll move on to the next thing. And I think we've all realised that in this world of so much, great TV, TV, different ways to watch. You go, okay, we need to now tell people this is what's coming up, get their interest a lot more, put out some sort of first looks and trailers, more of a movie release style, make sure the key art is popping in a huge overcrowded market, not just on the poster, but on the sort of UI that you're looking at. So I think actually the marketing we do now is really about how do you get the most impact and stand out from the assets that you use, and how do you release them in a different way that drives a conversation and recommendation around that show.
There was something that Charlie Moore at Red Bee said last year. He did a talk on it, which was, it used to be about tease then reveal. So you'd have like, you know, a little coming soon, and now it's reveal then tease. And so people expect to have a lot more content and information about a show before it launches. And also increasingly, because we're seeing a real trend for actually word of mouth counts more for how people choose a show to watch, that creating assets that you can give to your customers or your audiences, and then they can share those assets around. So I think there's a really big shift in terms of how we're talking to people about new shows.
You just have to create a lot of stuff now as well. So, you know, particularly with shows that have got very hungry fan bases, they constantly need feeding with more and more stuff, which means the complexity of the campaigns and how we launch them is far greater than it used to be.
Lots of information being seeded out and disseminated. Now, Brian, let's just take a look at this, because on a, and I know you guys do more than just linear, but on a linear channel, you would be desperate for someone to watch a show and then share drive through to the next show and then to the next show as well. The idea that someone would stick around for 3 hours of your content with their evening is that's surely a TV network's dream, that you've got them locked into that space. And are you noticing that the traditional networks in America are looking at this data and thinking, well, how can we possibly compete with 3 episodes of a thing that anyone can watch? Or in some cases, nearly 4, full of house, people watching four of those in a row on the first day.
Yeah, I mean, to Joe's point, I think it's all about distribution, and it's linear is just one of the platforms. There's many different VOD options that the networks and others are making available. So you can go back and watch linear content in ways other than just Netflix. But I will say that to your point, Netflix really has changed the game as far as training people of how to access content and how to think about viewing it. And I think people are really starting to really lean into the VOD platforms as a result.
Okay. Before I move on to the next graph, is there anything else that you want you feel we should know about this that's important?
Well, I think the key thing that in looking at this content, one of the things that our clients have come back and said is this has really changed our strategy of the ones that are developing content. Of, we used to think of linear and then a rerun and maybe syndication. Now that when they're developing content, they're looking at all of these different metrics and saying, well, after linear, is it going to also play on Netflix, and valuing content in that way. So I think that's and this is the type of data that they're using to decide that.
Out of curiosity, do you think this is having an impact on the sorts of shows that are getting made? Because obviously everything on Netflix, I know we're looking at just one night's worth of data, but it is evergreen. If I go and watch an episode of something, Orange is the New Black, that was produced 6 years ago, it's as relevant to me in that moment as it would be if it was released today. Do you think that is having an impact? I mean, obviously, Rufus, we talk about Love Island, such a huge success, stripped every night. It is in a way its own story uninterfered with by the outside world, so you could go back and watch that another time. But shows that have any sort of topicality to them, particularly in a world where you're making comedy shows, are you saying, well, okay, Roast Battle can play at any time in history, but if we do something that's perhaps a little bit more topical, that's the sort of thing that actually going forward we're not going to be able to make?
I mean, I think good content is good content. Back to the Friends piece, apparently people love watching Friends because there are no mobile phones in it, and it reminds a new audience of, a nicer time before social media. So there's something to be said for whether topicality is irrelevant. I think if you have...
But that's still stories, isn't it? That's still stories and characters. Great character.
Ultimately, if you have them, I think content exists. What we're seeing on all of our channels is that it's almost the older formats that still continue to be successful. It's almost as if people decided 5 or 6 years ago the shows that they loved, and now there's so much competition that they just stick with what they know.
Yeah.
And so it becomes harder to launch something completely new, which I think is why we're seeing, you know, unless it's a talent-led vehicle or there's a nostalgia or a classic IP that you can connect into, that people are kind of hooking on to things like that. So to your point about Orange is the New Black, because it was around 6 years ago, do people come back to that because it feels familiar and new, and it's hard to take on something completely new?
People don't give shows the benefit of the doubt now either. They make immediate judgments on things, which means that, you know, the challenge is how do we make sure that you know, ideas that we believe in that they might not immediately cut through, but we've got to hold our nerve and back them, because people are it's brutal.
And do you find the notion of overnights frustrating, because we are living in a world where that is only part of the picture? It's quite an antiquated way of going, is this show a success or not? And actually, it takes time to know if a show is a success because of the multitude of ways that people can...
I mean, generally, we walk around going, Love Island, season 3, that's when it became big. Because there's a real sense that you look at the overnights, and if something hasn't hit and launched and been a massive success, then you can't go to season 2. And that's really difficult, because you do, to your point, have to commit to shows and build them. And especially because we're in this world where there is so much competition, cutting through and having people find them, it can take longer. So yeah, holding your nerve is key.
But to your point is that you know, we will all say don't judge particularly in dramas, for example. They have huge amounts of consolidated viewing, way beyond the original 9 p.m. TX, for example. But the press will decide whether something is a success or a failure based on that overnight data, even if 7 days later the story is very different. So whilst, you know, I guess the challenge is how do we all as an industry wean ourselves off that 9:30? I mean, we're never going to wean ourselves off it. It's really important, and obviously for live shows and for sport and news and daytime and stuff, you know, that is the performance.
Yeah.
But for some of them, it is so radically different now, and we just have to get used to looking at it in a different way.
I mean, I'd agree with that. Like it's an indicator for us. So as I said, we don't really look at that. That's not our measure of performance now, but it's an indicator. I'll always look at it to see how it's gone. But to me, I'm more interested a week later and then 28 days. And in that respect, like something like Patrick Melrose, we didn't even start marketing it until after it had launched, like about 10 days afterwards.
Wow.
So I guess in a way that just shows you how we're not really that fussed, because it's a drama. People will be able to watch it how they watch it, or sit on our platform for a long time. So, you know, we're just really not as interested in that immediate.
That's an amazing strategy for marketing, really, when you think about it. 10 years ago, that would have been unheard of. You're going to plug a show after it's been on. Was that a very, very conscious decision? Oh, I mean, obviously it was a conscious decision. There's loads of money involved.
Total accident.
Yeah. We just forgot, guys.
Just totally slipped my mind.
I'm so sorry.
Here's that email.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, it was on a week ago. Oh,
whoopsie. No.
Someone's in trouble.
And is that a hard conversation to have with people that have worked in one model for a very long time? Say, listen, it doesn't matter we put the show out, it doesn't matter, we'll market it later.
No, not really. I mean, it might have been, it probably would have been a few years ago, but no, I guess because, as I said, because we've been offering just this plethora of ways to watch, and we're not as interested in the immediate overnights, for us we just went, you know, let's just put it out afterwards. We know, and we knew it would get, you know, good press coverage as well. So I think when you're looking at your marketing mix, you know, had Benedict Cumberbatch, we knew it was a very high quality show. We thought, well, actually, let's just go later and let the press talk about it for a while, and then we will market it later on.
Yeah.
So it was just a different way of trying things out, really, and doing it.
What we do find, though, on dramas again, is that you get a big overnight spike for the final episode sometimes, because people will also know that you know there'll be loads of spoilers out on social media and stuff, and you want to be there for that moment where it all culminates. So on Broadchurch, for example, you'll get a kind of big launch, and then it'll go down a bit on overnights because people are catching up at different times, but they all want to be there at that moment on the end when it ends.
Yeah, and there are certainly shows that have that cut through. Dr. Foster, for example, is a show where people...
You've got to be there in that moment.
You've got to watch it. Yeah.
Game of Thrones is the same, Handmaid's Tale. There's
course.
particular shows where you watch in that fashion because you don't want a spoiler in the office the next day. You know, so.
But there's also that kind of real FOMO, sort of fear of missing out, marketing that's needed, that ultimately I think to be really successful, you have to generate that kind of excitement. So to your point about press, I don't think press has ever been more important, because actually that starts the conversation, and then you kind of want to get everybody talking about it. I think if you miss that, it's incredibly hard to reach those peaks of a Stranger Things or a Love Island or a Dr. Foster.
Now, obviously, demographics hugely important in telly. You want to be able to advertise to the right people or know who your audience is. Our next graph talks us through, again, looking at Netflix data, some quite interesting stats about who's watching what. And I guess you think of SVOD platforms as being something that maybe has a slightly younger skewing uptake. But they've got a commission, which is the furthest right there, The Crown, which is drawing in a really, really big number of over 50s. I mean, 50% of the audience of The Crown is 50 plus. Now, is that a surprising bit of information for you to have found, Brian?
I think part of it is learning the data and also understanding the strategy. And because I remember when The Crown was released, I looked at this from the lens of an ad-supported network, and I thought, oh, this is, not really a great demographic breakdown. But then you realize, well, wait a second, they're bringing in new subscribers and not traditional users necessarily of Netflix. So this is an example of them, working to program to sell more subscriptions as opposed to necessarily ads. So I think, that's one of the things as we've looked across ethnicities and age and gender that's been very interesting, seeing what the strategy is and seeing them try to reach out to additional subscribers.
The thing that you hear about The Crown a lot is that there's a conversation which feels outside television with the general everyday public, where they are using phrases like, well, the production values on that show are really good. And that's the thing that you wouldn't necessarily expect people to be saying, but the money quite clearly is on screen, whether it's because Netflix have told you about the money they've spent on it or not. And the story of craft and TV craft is becoming part of the marketing of a show like that. Now, they've got a phenomenal budget to spend. I think they're spending forecast spend $8 billion on content in the next year, which is, I think, triple what the UK TV industry is going to spend on content. Does that put pressure on you guys? I mean, obviously Sky has huge commissions, lots of money to spend on stuff. Does it put pressure on you to find shows that look as good as Game of Thrones or look as good as The Crown?
I think, the competition in the TV space, particularly in drama, I guess, has meant that everybody has had to lift their game. But I think this has been going on for a very long time. So if you think about way back when Sopranos went on to HBO, I think that's the sort of show where everybody went, wow, TV can be something that is really chewy and immersive and complicated, and HBO has really sort of driven that. And then you have things like Game of Thrones, and of course everybody then decides, well, we have to compete, we have to up our production value. And so we've been really committed for years now about having, cinematic sort of scale on all our shows, not just on Atlantic, which is the sort of home of that stuff, but also on Sky One. So I wouldn't say that Netflix is an additional reason, or Amazon or whatever, just increased competition means that people are really conscious of the high quality of TV now and the production values, but I wouldn't say that's been the trigger point. I think that's been happening for a number of years, driven by consumer choice.
I did have a conversation about the amount of helicopters in succession with somebody this week. It was pretty impressive.
I know, expensive production.
Yeah.
It's like Riviera with yachts and helicopters.
Well, firstly, Brian, let's come back to this, because I'm intrigued to know again what your take on this data is. How is this useful to CBS or NBC or ABC over in the States? What are they gleaming from this that's going to affect the decisions that they make going forward?
Well, one of the things that, as they look through and they see what's being reached and what's not, they can help to value their programs if their program that they're trying to sell to Netflix has a demographic profile that might pull in additional subscribers. So that's kind of one of the views. And the other is really the primary usage that most people don't really appreciate of this data is on a weekly basis, just understanding if my numbers are down this week or up or whatever, what's happening and where else did my core audience go? And that's when they look at the demographic profiles and the specific viewers, that's one of the things that they're able to tell when they see a program that is really popular at a specific time, what's happened on it.
Well, I want to talk about audiences because they do obviously have a plethora of choices now. And we've actually got a little VT that we can show you from a project that ITV ran called Six Up, where they went to homes across Europe and the world and asked people about how they're watching stuff on their telly. So we should be able to have that for you now, and then we'll chat more about what they say in it. So that VT is titled Powershift. Do we feel that power shift in the jobs that you guys are doing, Rufus?
Well, I guess, you know, what that shows is that whatever market, whatever country that's in, it is, you know, they are in control now, and the idea that we can rely on viewers to turn up night after night, regular as clockwork, is just cloud cuckoo land now. So we have to, you know, work so much harder, never take audiences for granted. One of the interesting things coming through from all of this is that viewers are so happy now. You know, when I started my career in 1622, you'd still, you know, you'd get the whole, you know, there's always just repeats. There's nothing to watch anymore. They're so happy now, and what we're also finding is that, and I guess this is the challenge for us, is that a lot of these families, they have one person who is the kind of the tech guru who sets everything up, educates everyone, and then immediately you know, it's become everyone has their own sort of coping mechanisms and way of making everything work. But once they're in and once they're doing that, that is how they watch stuff forevermore. So I kind of, you know, the kind of old thing of, you know, you turn into your parents. Parents are turning into their children now, and I think that was the moment with The Crown and Netflix. Actually, that was the moment where my mum rings me up and says, "This Crown thing looks good, Netflix," and then there's a button on the remote control, and she gets it. It was her Christmas present from me, and that's it. She's in. So I think, but I think that the main takeout from that is, do not ever take our audiences for granted. It is incredibly competitive out there, but you also see from that what a kind of, you know, how amazingly satisfied they are with the industry, I think.
And when you look at the homepage of however they were interfacing there, whether it's an Amazon Stick or Apple TV or whatever it might be, something built into their set-top box, that obviously has changed. The EPG, as we know it, looks very different. From a marketing perspective, it's all about having, like the front cover of a book, something that's going to be attention-grabbing. Exactly, driven by Netflix. When it comes to channel identity and channel branding, do we actually think that people care? Do we think they care that a show was commissioned by Channel 5 first, or care that a show was a Sky show, or care that a show was an ITV2 show? Is there a world in which they just want to watch Love Island? I don't care if it was made by ITV2. They just want to watch that show because that's the show that appeals to them. And with that mindset, does that make running a channel a challenging proposition? I'm going to come to you with that first,
So I think when it comes to like repeat shows, that's probably, the show is well known, loved, everybody understands what it's about. When you're launching a show, I do think that channels help with a sort of sense of navigation about what that show is going to be like. So, you know, we've got a number of channels, well, hundreds, but four strong Sky channels. You know the sort of show you might get on Sky Atlantic compared to Sky One. So if you're sort of facing into a show you don't know anything about and you're making a decision, you might go, oh, I feel in the mood for something that's quite immersive. I can't have my phone there. I'm quite focused on it, something that's quite chewy, and you'll go to Atlantic. So it tells you what that's like. Whereas obviously you'll know what Sky Arts is, or Sky One, or Sky Witness. So I think it helps in navigation.
In a world where that stuff's being on my homepage, I'm going to take a show from you, and a show from you, and a show from you, and I'm going to put them there, and I'm going to see all this selection, and it's not going to tell me the backstory of that show. No, that's what I mean. If you don't know the backstory of the show, that channel sometimes gives you an idea of the type of show it is. But also, I'd remember that, like, still the vast majority of viewing is linear. Like, can't forget that. We're talking about SVOD a lot, but the majority of viewing on the Sky platform is still linear, and that is people going to a channel that they like, that they want to watch, because they know the sort of content they're interested is in that. So, you know, Sky
Witness, which was just rebranded from Living, home of US drama, that's sort of like Shonda Rhimes melodrama. People will go there because they know that is the show that they want to watch. So it may dissipate over time, but at this stage I think it still provides navigation for people about the mood they're in.
And I think it's important for, you know, one of our jobs is to really reinforce that channel branding and make sure that it is consistent, and the content that we deliver is consistent with that brand, because then they are synonymous. So we have to work hard to make sure that those two pieces are connected. At the beginning, there was a piece from UK TV, one of the promos, and they now have that prefix of UK TV Originals on the front of all their new shows. And so I think a lot of brands are really working to ensure that their content is synonymous with the channel, and that's one of our big objectives.
Yeah, and you look after some iconic, MTV, Comedy Central, they're iconic brands all over the world, and you still feel like their presence is as strong in this new climate as it ever was?
Look, without a doubt, I think there's a challenge. I think when you do get to EPGs, where it's about content first, you have to work hard to strengthen your brand, but equally be mindful that you have to build your content franchises as well, because if we are doing partnerships with the likes of Netflix and we're selling more of our content to other partners, you know, if you own the IP and you own great content franchises, that can be as powerful as well. So I think those two things are hand in hand.
And how do you help audiences in this landscape find those shows? What can you do as people involved in marketing to say, we've got a thing, we know this is a thing that you will like, try this out?
Well, I think that's coming back to the brand point. I think I would say the brand is more important than it's ever been before, and if we relegate that in the mix now, then we're going to come massively unstuck. I think we've really got to elevate that in the marketing mix now and make sure that we are a sort of, you know, a branded destination where people know what they're going to get, what they're going to get. And I think what we've got to really focus on from a marketing point of view is what we're finding still now in this world where we've got all these kind of big, powerful program brands, night after night, we reckon there are still about 30 to 40% of viewers who are up for grabs, who are winnable every night, and so one of the things that we're focusing on is how can you send out very time-specific messages to try and, you know, it's all very well and good to sort of build all of your awareness and your consideration as you build your program, build your marketing campaigns, but if you forget to close the deal right up to TX, then all that stuff's wasted. So we're spending a lot of time, for example, on kind of sending push notifications out on mobile. We can send out push notifications at kind of 8:58 p.m. to hundreds of thousands of people who we know like a certain show, and we know that people are, you know, we all know people are watching TV with their mobile in their hands. Send that out, bang, then you can kind of close that deal. So using sort of digital technology and mobile first stuff as a key part of our marketing mix is a real focus for us now.
That's great. I'm going to show you another VT in a second, which is all about how people talk about telly, and we touched on it earlier. After that VT, we'll have about 10 minutes left. So if you've got a question, ironically, the app, the interface app, is down. So if you've got a question, put your hand up at the end and we'll try and get to you. So have a think about your questions now, because it'd be nice to have some. But in the meantime, let's take another look at a VT. It's from the same project that ITV did, the 6 Up thing, and it again talks to audiences. There's so much there that I recognise from my own life and conversations that I have with people, where you think, yeah, the general public are and probably always have been your best marketing tool. So how do you get that message to them, and what is your metric of success for a marketing campaign? If you put X amount into a new show, a new project, how do you know whether that's worked for you, Kerry?
I think, you know, if we're launching a show on that first night, we'll all be on social media, and immediately you can tell whether it's going to be a hit or not. Like you're watching, like Channel 5 this week, we had Celebs on the Farm, and you're watching the social media there and going, okay, everyone's loving this and it's going to do really well. I mean, the measure of success generally comes back to the overall, you know, the first page of any marketing campaign will be our target is this consolidated or an overnight number that we're looking for, but being able to create, you know, fans around a show. I think what's interesting there for me is back to that point of, you know, using press to get people excited and then giving the audience and your customers loads of assets so that they can share, and making sure that you're on every social media platform so that they can have that conversation with you and talk about your content and really feel that they're building a relationship with it. I think that is absolutely key now to be successful in marketing.
Let's take a look at questions. Can I see any hands? Any hands at all? There is a guy right at the back there. Hello, sir. Project, use your diaphragm. The mic's coming down. Hey.
Hello. This is a question for Brian. It's quite well known that Netflix, well, quite famously known that Netflix don't release any figures, any viewing figures. So I just wondered where you got your data from.
Well, actually, that's at Nielsen. We've used our television technology. We've expanded it to be able to measure that as well. So it's data that we collect ourselves using an audio recognition approach. So very similar to how we do all the other television ratings in the U.S.
So the same. But it's still a sample that's taken.
Yeah, we have about 47,000 homes in the U.S. where we measure all their television, and you know, with Netflix in the U.S. about 70% of homes are able to stream, and about 67% of homes have Netflix. So it's a almost direct overlap. So it's not like it's a fringe or a small sample size. It's quite extensive, and that's we draw the data from that.
And obviously Netflix would if they were here would point out this is only on telly, not through mobiles, not through iPads, not through laptops, etc., etc. They would argue that there's way more viewing of these shows than what you've been able to record, or maybe they wouldn't argue it at all because they don't care.
Well, you know, I think that I don't think they've been displeased with some of the rankings that have been shared. So I think initially we try and be very transparent, and you know, the estimates are about a little bit north of 80%, 81, 82% of total usage is on the big screen. And and to your point about the quality of The Crown, when you have that high quality production value, you know, it's nice to see it on a 4K TV as opposed to, at least for my eyes, you know, a mobile device.
Thank you very much for your question. Are there any other questions in this room? Hello. I reckon we can hear you.
Yeah.
Go on.
So I just wanted to get your thoughts on, you know, the kind of revival that's happened. So you've got 4 different series that have been recommissioned or picked up like on the network because audiences have been in such control and they've had such a demand for that series. So you've got things like Brooklyn Nine-Nine and, like, for instance, Timeless, which was cancelled twice, and NBC have brought it back again because fans were so demanding and saying, like, look, we want this back. They hit social media really hard. They flew a helicopter over Comic-Con. Like, it was crazy what they did, and I just wondered, like, what do you think about kind of that sort of culture? Sorry.
Then is that too...
You take that one. Go on. Go on.
Okay.
In general, you just want to kick off with you, Joe.
Okay. Well, they're not my shows, obviously, so I can't really talk about them at all. But I mean, how great that you have people who love TV so much they will put a helicopter over Comic-Con. You know, so I mean, I think that just goes to the broader conversation about, you know, people are really engaged with TV, more so than ever. TV quality is fantastic, and we're just doing more and more to listen to our viewers. You know, so that's great news for everybody.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to fragmentation, because people that have a real vested interest and are passionate about a program expect to have that program delivered. So they're going back, and even though, you know, historically maybe it would be just too small of a viewership to have a blip, now there's so many different platforms, so many different ways to deliver it that they're able to revive it. So I agree with Joe. I think it's a great thing for TV.
Thank you very much. I mean, it is a fascinating time, and actually a very, very fascinating chat, and I don't think we can undersell actually the fact that in terms of those stats, no one's seen, the people who are seeing this in this room, pretty much the first people who have seen what Netflix have been doing according to your rating system, and there is a level of disruption, albeit one that you guys seem reasonably calm about. that is taking place. We're going to have to wrap this up. I'm so sorry, everyone, but I've had a... Oh, go on, Brian. What final thought? Go Jerry Springer on me.
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify. For those of, Stranger Things fans, there are actually 8 episodes. I said 12, and it's going to under.
Does that mean bugging you?
Yeah. Sorry.
They had 4 extra hours. Think what they could have done. They probably watched Orange is the New Black.
Well, coffee breaks.
Yeah, exactly. Brian, thank you. Rufus, thank you. Joe, thank you. And Kerry, thank you as well. A round of applause for our panel, everybody. Have a lovely rest of the festival, and thanks for not watching Jeremy Corbyn.